Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. We're going to talk a lot about college football portal season. It's crazy. The portal is not technically open yet by NCAA guidelines, but it doesn't stop the young men across the country in college football from hitting up Hayes Fawcett and saying, hey, make me a graphic because I'm out of here. And so what I want to do is talk about the portal, talk about some of the early names that are already in. Before we do, though, let me just say this. I think this is going to be the most interesting year in the portal, both for football and basketball, by the way. And I'll tell you why. It is because this is the first year since the portal became a thing. There are no more really COVID seniors. In other words, everybody after the 2021 season, if you want to remember in 2021, you could opt out of the season. And if you did not want to play because of COVID concerns, you did not lose a year of eligibility. Okay. So everybody got an extra year of eligibility. Well, this is the first year that we're not really going to have players, that have that COVID year of eligibility. And so because of it, it just dwindles the pool of people that are even going to enter the portal, which makes it fascinating. I remember in the spring with basketball, Sean Miller was the coach at Xavier, came out and said, listen, we got to take advantage. And he threw out the stat. He said, look, my guys have done the research. 25% of all guys in the portal are COVID seniors. Next year, the pool could be up to 25% less total players. So I bring it up because I think that college football is going to be fascinating. I think bottom line, there's going to be a supply and demand issue. The demand is going to be much greater than supply, especially at all the key positions: quarterback, wide receiver, defensive end, offensive tackle, whatever. And so I think it's going to be kind of interesting because I think we all think that there's kind of this, there was a boom with NIL money and now the money's going to come back to I think it's going to be the opposite. I think kids are going to get paid because I don't think there's going to be nearly as much talent as teams that need said talent in the portal. So like I said, portal doesn't technically open until next Monday. But with that said, it didn't stop anybody from entering the portal. So let's get to just a few of the big names that are already in. And let's start with probably the biggest name. And this probably reflects that this isn't going to be the greatest portal season ever, but it's Miller Moss, the quarterback from USC. Okay. And so Miller Moss, very interesting player. 3 years at USC, 1 under Clay Helton, 2 backing up Caleb Williams. Comes in last year in the bowl game. I think there was a thought that he was going to enter the portal last year. And I think there was a thought that USC was going to take a portal quarterback a year ago. It's easy to forget this now. Will Howard, who of course just famously lost to Michigan a few days ago, took a visit to USC, and there was thought that he was going to go to USC. Miller Moss goes to the bowl game, throws 6 touchdowns. Everybody thinks he's great. He decides to come back. He gets the starting job. And I'll be honest, like I don't think he's like the greatest quarterback ever, but I think he's very serviceable. And I think he got kind of a bum rap towards the end of the season at USC. When USC was struggling, now listen, bottom line is we can't deny the fact that USC was not very good and he had a lot to do with it. But at the same time, like when I look at what USC's problems were, I think he was part of the problem. But I actually think that Lincoln Riley felt a little bit of pressure to go ahead and make the quarterback change, not because there was a better option on the team, but instead because he just had to get the fans off his back. So Jaden Mayava gets the opportunity. I don't think Jaden Mayava was any better. They got destroyed by Notre Dame on the final game of the regular season, obviously barely beat UCLA to end the year. But Miller Moss, because of who he is, because he is a 4th going on 5th year guy, because of the fact that he has game experience in a power conference, is going to be in demand. This is a kid that this season did complete 64% of his passes, 18 touchdowns. And oh, by the way, did beat LSU, did have USC in position to beat Penn State early in the season. So it's going to be fascinating. But what's also going to be fascinating is this. Some of the schools that are being linked to Miller Moss have a freshman quarterback. And so I'm just curious with the quarterback dominoes, what it is going to mean in the bigger picture, because some schools like a Michigan, like a Auburn, like maybe even a USC, They are going to bring in young quarterbacks that are expected to play right away and contribute right away. We know about Michigan, Bryce Underwood, the $12 million man. I think the number's at about 12 million is what they paid for Bryce Underwood. Obviously at Auburn, they're bringing in a kid by the name of Deuce Knight. Okay. So I just bring it up to very simply say Miller Moss has been linked early to Michigan and Auburn. And my whole thing, if I'm him, I think there's a scenario where I can get drafted after this year if I go to the right school. So the question becomes, do you go to a school like Michigan? Do you go to a school like Auburn, where you're probably going to have to almost serve as that veteran mentor role for a kid that is kind of coming up? No different in the NFL that, whoever, Alex Smith mentors Patrick Mahomes for a year before giving up the job to Patrick Mahomes. So it's going to be fascinating, but Miller Moss was a kid that was projected to go in the portal since the day he got benched. It's not really a surprise. The early speculation was Michigan. Now I tend to think that that's probably not going to happen for the fact that he probably wants to play and play a lot and not serve as a mentor. So we'll see where he ends up. Other schools, by the way, outside of Michigan and Auburn that have been speculated with Miller Moss. There is some speculation on Iowa. I've seen a couple other schools as well. Louisville is obviously going to need a quarterback with Jeff Brom. So Miller Moss, probably the most high-profile name that has entered the portal so far. Really quickly, let's get to the next quarterback that is at least an interesting name. And this is a kid that listen, I think producer Matt probably knows pretty well. Caton Salter, who, of course, spent the last 3 years at Liberty. If you're not familiar with Liberty, remember, it was 2 years ago that Liberty went, 12-0, 13-0, played Oregon in the Fiesta Bowl. This was a kid, by the way, it's worth noting, I should even backtrack, played for Hugh Freeze at Liberty, had a ton of success under Hugh Freeze. He decides to come back to Liberty, balls out as a last 2 seasons ago in the 2023 season, finishes that season throwing for 32 touchdowns on 61% completion percentage. And oh, by the way, on top of that, he also rushed for 12 more touchdowns. So a year ago, he enters the portal. Everybody's like, oh my goodness, is he going to follow Hugh Freeze to Auburn? Is he going to go somewhere else? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? Well, he comes back to Liberty. The season does not go quite as planned. He had some injuries. There were some issues, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Still throws for 15 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but his completion percentage is down. His rushing numbers are down. It's not going to stop somebody from taking a chance on him because, again, ultimately, the supply of quarterbacks in the portal is not going to be as great as the demand. I think the obvious name, the obvious place where I would expect him to probably land, let's call a spade. You got to think it's Auburn, right? So Auburn, first of all, the Payton Thorne era is over. Thank the Lord, sweet Jesus. It was a tough watch there at some points, okay? But Payton Thorne is going to be gone. Obviously, we saw speculation that Hank Brown, who was his backup, is going to go into the portal as well. And so I just bring it up to very simply say that when I look at the situation at Auburn, they are bringing in, as I said, a 5-star freshman named Deuce Knight next year, but he's not the kind of kid that you're just going to hand the keys to day one, or at least that's not the speculation right now. You're going to want to bring in a veteran quarterback. This feels like the kind of guy. Obviously, Auburn feels like the obvious choice to start there. We'll see what happens as he is, again, not technically in the portal, but he's sort of in the portal, so we will evaluate that from there. Let's go to the wide receiver position really quick. And rip through a couple names because I'll say this. I saw an article about 2 weeks ago. It was almost like a portal primer from ESPN. Max Olson used to cover the portal at The Athletic. He is now at ESPN. But I just bring it up because he said that obviously quarterbacks are always in this NIL era going to make money. But he said there is a lot of demand for difference-making wide receivers. And the number one kid right now in the portal that you need to know is a kid by the name of Casey Concepcion. Okay, he played at NC State the last couple years. And by the way, 2 years ago was a freshman All-American at NC State. It's funny because I remember talking about this kid early in the year. Remember, NC State played Tennessee in week 2. NC State played Clemson early in the year. So you're just kind of learning these teams. You're like, oh, this kid was really good last year. Like a lot of other people, his numbers dipped a little bit. I think they dipped, frankly, because, by the way, let's call a spade. NC State wasn't very good this past season. So again, 2 years ago, 71 catches, 10 touchdowns, still had 53 catches with 6 touchdowns this year. As you can see on the screen, 124 catches, 16 touchdowns. You do that at the power forward level, you are going to be a kid that's in demand. So I bring it up because there is already a list. So you knew the kid was going to hit the portal when the list already emerges of schools that could hypothetically be interested. Nobody tampered, nobody did anything, nobody forced them into the portal. But I just bring it up because a list of schools has already emerged. Alabama is obviously going to be looking for wide receiver help alongside Ryan Williams. Auburn is always going to be looking for wide receiver help as they try to bring along whoever the quarterbacks are. The school that really interested me, though, Colorado, Coach Prime. Listen, you criticize Coach Prime for whatever. He was awesome this year, but he has done an unbelievable job of evaluating wide receivers in the portal over the last couple of years. Forget Travis Hunter. He's, game-changing talent. But LeJohntay Wester was a 1,000-yard receiver at Florida Atlantic. I remember talking about the portal, and we never really even discussed him last year. Shows you what Coach Prime saw in that kid. And now I think LeJohntay Wester is going to be like a second or third round draft pick this year. 70 catches, 10 touchdowns for Colorado this year. So I'm talking about now about players currently on Colorado. But LeJohntay Wester, Jimmy Horn 2 years ago, remember? Jimmy Horn had offers from Texas A&M, from Penn State. He ends up going to Colorado. So this kid, KC Concepcion, I will be fascinated. But listen, I think he's an early name to watch if you're a Colorado Buffaloes fan. And I know there are a lot of them out there. A couple other wide receivers really quickly. I think this is kind of an interesting name. A player that was a 5-star in the class of 2024. So a year ago, Micah Hudson. If you're not familiar with this name, okay. So he is the highest rated recruit to ever commit to Texas Tech in the recruiting era. Kind of an interesting backstory. Really was kind of an under the radar kid. Texas Tech gets him to commit. Then last year, after he commits, all the other big schools, Texas A&M, whoever, come in and try to convince him, hey, you need to come with us. Come be part of what we're doing. Well, he ends up going to Texas Tech. But unlike so many of these other 5-star freshman wide receivers, whether it was Ryan Williams in Alabama, whether it was Cam Coleman at Auburn, whether it was Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State, Micah Hudson didn't really kind of have the impact that I think a lot of people thought he would. 8 catches, 123 yards in his one season at Texas Tech. Now he is in the portal. As of right now, I think it's a little early to speculate, but what I will tell you, point blank, end of story. 5-star wide receiver, class of 2024. He has relationships with all these schools. I would be stunned if he doesn't commit to one of these true blue blood schools, whether it's Texas, whether it's Bama. Listen, Colorado, obviously they're not a blue blood in the traditional sense, but like they're going to put three receivers into the NFL draft this year, 2 receivers. Will Shepard, I didn't even mention with the Colorado thing a minute ago. So I just bring it up because this is a kid, even though the production wasn't great, I promise you, this is a kid that is going to command and demand a lot of he's just going to be a kid that a lot of people are interested in. I'm fascinated to see his list, see his visits. He is another name to keep an eye on. Really quickly, and producer Matt, I apologize, I didn't even give you this, but I saw that there is a report, if I'm not mistaken, that CJ Daniels, who played this past year at LSU, could very well enter the portal. By the way, very tough day for LSU. One of their 5-star commits, this is not Bryce Underwood, but one of their 5-star commits decommitted is going to Texas. Well, I bring it up because CJ Daniels this year was a player that they were expecting big things from. He ends up with 42 catches for 480 yards, no touchdowns. There is a report that he is expected to enter the portal. Now, some people have refuted that report. So if you're listening to this show, we're recording at about 2:30 Eastern time. If you're listening, stuff can change. If he doesn't go in the portal, don't blame Torres. I'm just telling you what is being reported as of, again, 2:30 Eastern time right now. But he's kind of a big name to know. Another name, producer Matt, I forgot to tell you this one, so I apologize. But Jonte Cook was a former 5-star, played at Texas over the last couple of years. He actually announced like 3 or 4 weeks ago that he was going to be entering the portal. And he's another one. Even though the production wasn't through the roof at Texas, 16 catches, 2 touchdowns this season, it's not going to change the fact that he is going to be in demand. He's one I would expect to come off the board early because, of course, as I just said a second ago, he's been in the portal for a few days. Worth noting, a couple defensive players. Jamari Butler, a defensive lineman from Nebraska. Nebraska, for whatever reason, seems to be hemorrhaging players early in the portal cycle. But this was a kid that, again, Nebraska's defense was pretty good this season. He finished this past year. This is Jamari Butler with 7 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, was one of the best players on that defense. Nebraska has lost 1 or 2 other players to the portal since we started recording. So, yeah, all I'll say is it's about to get crazy. And again, it's that time of year. There's going to be a lot of players enter, but I'll say this really quickly. I'll be fascinated to see, again, the quality of player who enters the portal, because at the end of the day, really, if you think about the portal, and we've talked about this with basketball, with whatever, you think about it, is most of the good players fall into most of the players in the portal. Let me even backtrack. Fall into 4 buckets. They're either kids that aren't playing at a high major that are going to transfer, or Power 4 that are going to transfer. They're COVID kids, which we just talked about. They're players off of a coaching staff where there was a firing. So think back to last year, all the guys from Alabama that went in the portal, all the guys at Texas A&M went in the portal, et cetera. And then you have the the group of 5 guys that are bouncing up a level that can play. And so I just bring it up because it's going to be fascinating. There was no real churn at the high major level. So, like, unless something crazy happens at Ohio State or USC or somebody, like that quality of player, the Caleb Downs type player, Walter Nolan, like, they're not going to be in the portal because those guys don't generally leave places that they're expected to be. So I just bring it up because you take out the COVID kids, you take out the fact that it's been a quieter recruiting cycle or a quieter coaching carousel cycle. I don't think the portal is going to be too crazy. But we've done enough portal. We will keep you updated as things go on, because I do think that it is about to get a little bit crazy. I already see some people talking about Miller Moss to Michigan in the chat, but that is our first of what I expect to be many portal updates.